Hi there. My name's Tommy Yionoulis, and I am the host of the brand new podcast, Empire Builders, scaling success one location at a time. This is a podcast dedicated to talking to the founders and the current leadership of those large multi-location brands that you see every single day where you eat and shop at. And we want to find out from these guys, why this business, right? Why of all the things you could do in the world, you chose to do this? We're going to learn what their challenges were at the beginning, what almost broke them. We're going to learn what they're facing today. And as always, we're going to end the show with a wonderful war story. That's one of those stories where you go, I can't believe we got through this. It was insanity, and hopefully they always end with a nice little laugh. So I can't tell you how excited I am to bring you these interviews with these amazing guests and just stoke that entrepreneurial flame that we all have to learn what it took to kind of get where they are today and how they got successful. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to sharing these wonderful interviews with you. Hey there, it's Tommy Yionoulis back with another episode of Empire Builders. I am so excited to welcome our guest today. Please welcome Abtin Hashemian. Abtin, how are you doing, man?
Doing well. Thanks for your time.
Oh, thank you for coming on to the show today. We're super excited to have you. So, I always ask the same questions every show. So let's just get started with the first question is, tell us what you're doing today and tell us about your company.
Yes. So I happen to be leading operations in our business, overseeing two different concepts. So my partners and I are multi-unit Subway franchisees, and we're also brand owners of a local micro chain here in Southern California. It's a Pokeme concept that was founded in 2016. And on the Subway side of things, we've been multi-unit Subway franchisees since 1989 as well.
1989? Okay. So, this is how the podcast derails very quickly. We're going to talk Subway, man. Okay. So I worked at Quiznos 2008, 2009, at the top of their fame, 5,000-ish units. And I worked in franchise assistance, which, imagine being the Quiznos franchise assistance manager during the 2008 downturn, right? When we were dropping stores left and right. So, that was like my second MBA. But I've been super critical of Subway for years. And when I say I've written a couple of blogs and I've complained about them on my old podcast. It's not like I've been out, no one cares, but I've been personally critical having worked at Quiznos, right? So I want to know about your Subway experience. So you've obviously been since 1989, so you must have some profitable stores, right? So how many units do you have?
So we were up to 16 locations at one time. We've scaled down to 11. I'm sure you're pretty familiar with the LA market. There's a lot of development going on. So with some leases coming to an end, even if they're premium real estate, A+ locations, landlords are not even looking at Subway anymore because, again, they want to graze their commercial property or plaza and build a mixed-use development with housing up top and retail underneath.
Yep.
We were also development agents for the country of Egypt. So we brought Subway to the country of Egypt as well. Right before, I'm sure you're familiar with history, right before the Arab Spring. So the timing on that wasn't great, but fortunately for us, again, we were in great locations and we had a successful exit several years ago as well. And yes, on the Poke side of things, we also scaled to 6 locations. We had a successful exit in one of our locations actually 2 weeks ago. And one of them is actually a licensing play. We're in the largest food hall in California with 25 other brands. And
That's really cool. So how did those new sidekicks work for you guys?
Doing well. Actually, I was just on LinkedIn a couple minutes ago. There was some media regarding just the marketing
Yeah.
or supply chain issues regarding at least the cookie foot long. And initially when that happened, because they sold out within the first 2 weeks, and it wasn't until recently in the last week or so. And again, the rollout was in January, I believe. And they were recently, in the last week or two, able to restock the foot long cookies. And initially when the supply chain issues occurred, the first thing that came to mind, even for a company with the scale of Subway, was I knew it was a marketing gimmick. I think kind of like what we're seeing in the sneaker scene or other drops in kind of other subcultures or other segments of our market, just creating pent-up demand and excitement for a product. And that was the first thing that came to mind. So it was kind of hard initially to wrap my head around the idea of, wow, especially with where the brand is taking a risk like that by kind of artificially holding a product back to create pent-up demand. But it looks like some people are also saying the same thing. So in general, yeah, a big fan. I think if it's done right, it's an added driver to the average check without eating up sales or eating into your foot long sales or your sandwich sales, things like that. So
yeah, that's really interesting. So they actually had the supply, but they just held it back to try to drive people to come back more often to see if it was in stock. That's a ballsy move, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Props for that.
Yeah, it just seems it seems like this approach is more in line with kind of the brand refresh or the new MO, where again you kind of have a new cohort of young professionals coming into the brand. I think Subway for a really prolonged time was a lot of incumbents or headquartered in Connecticut, a lot of veteran team members who the company retained for decades on end. So I think we found ourselves in some silos, and a lot of things weren't really based on merit or performance. It's kind of like,
Sure.
who do you know? You've been here for a while. We brought in a new CEO, moved part of our headquarters to Miami, which helps attract talent, a breath of fresh air. And I think across all these different touch points, you're seeing whether it's the sidekicks, whether it's these different marketing ploys as we're talking about, we're starting to see it play out.
Well, and I mean, I feel like, and you please confirm if I'm right or wrong, that's the most successful marketing thing that they've done in 15 years. Would you agree with that?
Well said. I mean, in the traditional sense, I think also, again, the menu engineering, I don't know if you've noticed recently, but we moved away from build your own model to a little bit more of a curated menu where we're just selecting the number 7 or the number 12, similar to some of our competitors. And I also thought, or I still believe, our restaurant remodels were another good marketing kind of touch. I think it helps with the guest experience, and it also helps with our team member experience as well when you're working in a restaurant that is a little bit more fresh as well. But to your point, yeah, I really can't remember another rollout that has been as successful as this. I think the last thing that really, which was a once in a generation phenomenon, which we all know was the $5 foot long, and then we saw a lot of other concepts kind of play that game as well. So
yeah, we copied you with those $3 slimmies, or I don't remember what they're called anymore. Yeah, but in LA you didn't roll $5, right? You went with like a $6 or $7 because of just rents and prices. It was $5 more for the middle of the country, like New York market, like, you know, West Coast, East Coast seem to always have higher price points because of rents.
No, we did the $5 foot long, and I think the early 2000s, same time as like you're mentioning, Quiznos in 08, 09, and yeah. So in terms of the timeline for Subway, definitely a lot of momentum. I think you had the Atkins diet in the early 2000s, and then we brought in the toaster similar to Quiznos, and I think that was one of kind of I don't want to call it a death blow, but obviously
Quiznos, it was. You took away our competitive differentiator. That whole, I don't know how, from what I had heard about that deal, was that who do you guys have? You have Coke right now, but you're switching to Pepsi, right? And we had Coke at the time, and Coke wanted to be with Subway more than they wanted to be with Quiznos because of unit count. So they basically made the deal that they would buy those toasters, right? If they came over. So it was like a double gut punch. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it really, there was a couple of things that made Subway do better than Quiznos. Oh, a lot of things I should say. But like, yeah, that was interesting. Let me ask you this question, because you touched on something that I was like super interested in. I always look at these. Okay, I get there's some remodels that have to happen right now, especially with the advent of delivery drivers coming in and grabbing orders. You need to have a place that's secure but easy to access, where you can put those delivery orders so those guys can come in. So I totally understand that as a remodel. We got to put a shelf in somewhere or something, right? But I always look at, when I'm looking at brands, especially brands that are struggling, right? And I mean, and you know, for a long time, AUVs at Subway were coming down, and you know, there were a lot of operators that were really struggling. I always look at like people who like, I always look at like remodels and stuff like that. A lot of the time, I'm just like, dude, this is just a corporate team that doesn't know what to do, and they're just, well, you know, they hire some research company and they go, well, what colors do people want, or what logo do they like better? And what they don't ask the question is, like, so they ask these very pointed questions, and these marketing people come back and they go, okay, we've got to come up and remodel the restaurant or change all this stuff. But then they don't ask the question, is like, what do customers really want? Well, they want clean restaurants. They want well-staffed restaurants. They want fresh ingredients, and they want to get in and out of there in a specific time frame, and they want to have exactly what they paid for. That's what they really want. That's why they're not coming, right? And you can change the paint color and put new signs everywhere. And I get really frustrated with that, because it's always on the back of the franchisees. And a lot of times it's on the back of the franchisees that aren't making money. And I saw this at Quiznos. There's a tipping point in a franchise system. And when your franchisees hit that point where they're like, look, like it's like once that's that last like straw snapping in half, right? Where they're like, no, my AUVs are $440 a year. I'm losing $3,000 a month on this store, and you want me to spend $35,000 doing your refresh? Like, once the franchisees disengage from the franchisor and they go, nope, this guy's not looking out for me, you're over. Because at corporate, you only have several levers you can pull to save the system. And the only lever you can really pull is marketing, to get people in to grow AUVs. That's like the really only thing you can do. You can add some technology and stuff, but at the end of the day, it all results in getting sales to those franchisees and making them profitable, right? And I was looking at, and every time I hear, oh, we got to do this refresh, I'm like, no, you got to get customers in there. Like, they're not coming because of the color of the paint. You know, I grew up on the East Coast. There's tons of sub shops that haven't been refreshed in 80 years. You know, they're ugly and old, but they have great subs and great pizza. So you go in there and you buy them, and you don't care, right? No one's going to Subway for the dining experience. You know what I mean? They're going to get some subs, they're going to sit there and eat them, or they're going to take them home, right? So I want to know but you said that you thought that the refreshes were good. I want to know, you can tell me I'm wrong, but that's sort of my impression.
Well said. I mean, definitely a lot to unpack here. We're on the same wavelength. I'm a big believer on controlling and influencing what's happening between our four walls, obviously led by hospitality. Yeah. I think Subway, we definitely put ourselves in a corner for a very prolonged period because of the $5 price point. I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate to share this example in this conversation, maybe offline, but I think the example I bring up in a lot of discourse or day-to-day conversation with peers or colleagues is, and for the sake of this conversation, I'll kind of reframe it in other ways. Like, we could give the worst service humanly possible. We could start swinging at our customers. We could literally throw soda on them, and start yelling on them and hope the door hits them on their way out. But hey, they're paying $5 for a foot long, and that's all they'll remember, and they're happy. So when a concept is predicated on on deep discounting and heavy discounting for a prolonged period, you're putting your consumer in a corner. And then when you take that price point away, it's a really dangerous proposition. So even for the other concepts that I'm involved in right now, but again, boiling it back down to Subway, in a lot of our internal meetings, we talk a lot about a lot of different KPIs. How are we driving traffic counts, sales, increasing productivity, things like that. And sometimes I have to interject and simply say, let's forget about everything. Let's just focus on hospitality and training. And I think if those two things are in place, we'll get our ducks in a row. So, but in terms of the store remodels, again, we're on the same wavelength. We're speaking the same language. Again, we were one of the first cohorts back in '89 to enter the system, one of the first few thousand franchisees. So we definitely got in at a good time, and we, along with our own company growing, the mother company grew alongside us. So we're big allies of Subway. We're in A+ premium locations, and there's a lot of alignment. That's not the case for a lot of franchisees. A lot of franchisees are very rogue, or they try to do things their own way. I mean, we have a lot of friends or colleagues that have tried to rebel against the system or do things their way. But again, we're not really big fans of that. So when this new brand refresh and the new store remodels rolled out, let's just call it 5 years ago, or maybe a little bit earlier, there was a little grant, which again, a lot of franchisees weren't even thinking about remodels, to your point. 5 years ago, they were just thinking of profitability and surviving. And but there was, I believe, like a $10,000 grant to immediately remodel your stores. And we took up the offer for a majority of our stores because, again, even and again, strategic thinking as well. Like, we have a location right across from the University of Southern California, USC.
Yeah.
And again, the lease is kind of up in the air. The landlord is thinking of developing it for student housing. So just full disclosure, I don't even know if I'm supposed to be talking about this, but again, essentially we're kind of month to month until we figure out what the landlord wants to do. And this is a high volume, one of our highest or best performing locations. And we have a location just like 2 or 3 blocks down the street from our own location as well, as you're familiar with Subway's footprint. A lot of locations are close to each other. So we actually, and even though it's one of our lowest volume locations, we just decided to invest in a remodel because our thinking is, if we're not able to extend the lease on our location right next to USC, we'll be able to drive our traffic and our customers to our neighboring location with a new remodel, brand refresh, and a store that looks clean and updated. So. Again, a lot to unpack with this. In general, we're big advocates for the brand, and but a lot of those frustrations and that sentiment that you were mentioning regarding investing the 35,000, we're in the red 3,000 this month, and a lot of franchisees being at their wits' end. Yeah, we feel this. We're not immune to it as well. There are some locations where we also feel the pain, or they're not performing in our portfolio or our company as well. So, and maybe this gets to another conversation for another day regarding just, again, roadmap or strategies or different operators and their vision and things like that.
And actually, I'm just like such a sub nerd. I just invented that term, but I am, because I worked at Quiznos and we were battling you guys and whatnot. And so obviously I'm so interested in Subway. And also, I'll be honest with you, like when I was a kid, like in the 80s, like when you guys were buying those franchises, I lived in like rural Maryland between Baltimore and Washington. Like we were bellmen at a hotel and we had the bellman open and we played golf, and we're horrible. And we hacked it up at the winner Subway sub that everyone had to pay for. Like that was the thing for us, Like it's crazy because you don't realize how small these brands were at some point and like how unique they were, and stuff like that. And so like I love Subway, and I I eat Subway very regularly, even though I complain about them a lot, like on some of their decisions. But I also give them props, and I think that those sidekicks were genius, and and I'm happy, and I'm curious to see what Rourke will do with you guys. If that infusion of cash will help. But I do want to step up a level, because it really sounds like you're more of a holding company and a concept development company. And yes, you have Subways and you have these Poke businesses, but you're obviously, what I thought was really interesting that you touched on earlier is that, it seems like you're cashing out on these stores, and like, you build something and then you sell it off, and you build something and you sell it off, and then you hold these ones over here, but then you're building that. So I want to get to that kind of investment strategy, because I want to learn more about that part of your business. Why don't you explain kind of what that's all about?
Sure. So, I mean, kind of taking 2 steps back regarding even some of your childhood, and that's definitely some of how our origin story started as well. I mean, my dad and his partner of over 35 years, they both worked at Bob's Big Boy, and we're involved in a couple other things. And my dad used to go to a local Subway after work and just pick up BMT sandwiches and watch the Lakers with my mom, and they're just sitting in front of the TV. And on one visit to the local Subway, there was a business consultant in the restaurant doing a field visit, and a conversation started. And I think within a year, we got involved in the brand. So, yeah, and like you mentioned, a lot of growth. It's pretty remarkable. But and kind of going back earlier in our conversation, a lot of synergy, and as we know, in a lot of investment opportunities, timing is key in the market. Whether we're conscious of it or not, or whether it's intentional or not. So again, the Atkins side in early 2000s, even though I was a child, I'm only 34 now, but I remember that created a little attention and buzz. And then we had the toasters. And then we had a certain spokesperson, I'm not going to name their name, but I think a former Subway CFO said that 50% of the brand's growth could be attributed to that one spokesperson. And then we had the $5 footlong on, and that was amongst the backdrop of the downturn in the market in around 07, 08, 09. Yeah, so a lot of synergy. And the whole $5 footlong thing, it was just a franchisee in Florida around this time just did a test, and the lines were out the door for prolonged periods, weeks on end. And Fred DeLuca, our founder, went down to Florida, checked it out, and we started testing it out of the markets, and we immediately rolled it out nationwide. So that's when we made most of our money. Just bottom lines or numbers that we'll probably never see again. So a really good time to be in the concept. That's where a lot of our scaling happened, a lot of pressure from the mother company to kind of develop. Really, the MO was predicated on rapid growth. We obviously are seeing the consequences of that now with a lot of store closures, or a lot of your own shops cannibalizing your other businesses at other locations. And for full disclosure, I think we were one of the first franchisees, at least in this market, who strategically decided not to renew a lease and to close about 4 or 5 years ago. And back then, behind closed doors, our local development agent also essentially applauded us, saying, "Hey, you're making the right decision." And it wasn't only until recently, in the last year or two, that they've started to vocalize that and communicated that to other franchisees, or essentially kind of given the green light on store closures, whereas in the past it was kind of a battle, or they were putting their full support behind us. So to your question of developing concepts, so my father and his partner have been business partners for 35 years, and there's 2 kids on each side, so we're all best friends and business partners. Nice. And we've definitely bootstrapped and self-funded all of our growth to date. And in 2016, as investors, we bought into this Poke concept. And after a year, we bought out, he was a sushi chef, our original partner, and started scaling that concept. So we're at an interesting inflection point where the new generation is iterating new concepts, and to your point, just looking to roll out new concepts, especially with our operating experience, and bring a little excitement and something new to the market. And again, to your point with the attention economy, and especially in a saturated, overly competitive or hyper competitive market like Los Angeles, again, people's attention spans are really short. Something that's really hot or trending could do really well for a year or two, but yeah, we have to constantly be iterating, and that's kind of the point we're at right now.
Yeah, I call that the frozen yogurt syndrome, which frozen yogurt was huge in the 80s and it disappeared in the 90s. And then, 10 years ago, I had 7 frozen yogurt, places around me. And now I've got like 1, you know what I mean? Like it just kind of reinvents itself and then it fizzles out because it gets like overpopulated. And you're right. In LA, it's tough because LA is just a spread out strip center city, and you can have a concept, and no one, even though it's there, people don't even see it because it's there's so much going on, But that's cool, and so Poke's hot right now, right? And so is your idea that you're at 7 units with this Poke thing? Are you looking to maybe like start to become a franchisor and try to franchise it out, or do you think you might just try to find someone to pick up all 7 and move them off your plate, take that cash and go build another concept, or where are you kind of towards that?
Yes, I mean that's exactly where we're at. I mean we meet internally pretty often, and that was the topic of conversation and the bulk of our conversation in our last meeting. So definitely at an inflection point, and just to kind of paint this picture for you in regards to this category. So really in 2015, 2016, you had the early adopters and some of the first to market concepts in this category open up in Southern California, particularly Los Angeles. Again, this is traditionally a Hawaiian cuisine, and even though there was maybe a select few shops on the West Coast, primarily in Los Angeles, down to San Diego, or maybe in Seattle, and I wouldn't say more than a handful pre-2015, but it was in 2015 that a lot of mom and pops, or some of these brands that we've come to know in this category, started laying down their roots and building their companies. So we were one of the first to market as well, and I mean it was just pure euphoria and pandemonium. I mean, lunch, dinner, line out the door, everything was organic, everything was inbound, 0 ad dollars. And for the consumer in this market, it was something very novel and exciting. I think we've, at least this local LA market, has been very fond of other raw fish offerings like sushi, ceviche, or other raw dishes from other cultures that were predominant in this market. But poke was something new and exciting. So a lot of year-over-year growth, and COVID accelerated that. So my kind of theory on that is, again, with a lot of recreational things closed, especially in that first initial year of COVID, including full service restaurants, sit-down restaurants, bowling alleys, parks. Here in Southern California, they even closed the beaches for a while. So one of the only avenues to kind of have any type of social stimulation was quick service or fast casual restaurants. So you walked in, you have bright menus, there's lights, there's team members on the front lines that you can socialize with and interact with. And to wrap it up really nicely, you're in and out within a few minutes. A lot of people, irregardless of your opinion on what was happening, were erring on the side of caution. So it was nice to be able to get an elevated cuisine in a quick service format, and you're in and out within several minutes. So record sales during COVID, and on top of that, sprinkle on top of that the PPP loans, which were essentially a grant and free money, and then the employee tax credit shortly after. So it's only in the last 12 to 18 months that we've really seen our true numbers. And this is all while the category is maturing and your AUVs are stabilizing. So it's only really in the last year where we're spending money on ad dollars, whether it's paid social, local street marketing, and all these different efforts as well. So in general, I'm a very big fan and believer in the category. I think when you speak with a lot of partners who operate in these different marketplaces like DoorDash or these third-party vendors, they'll tell you, and also anecdotally, you'll hear from other operators as well, that whether it's pizza, sushi, Mediterranean, I think another huge winner in the delivery space is Poke. It travels really well, and it's a very user-friendly type of cuisine as well. So yeah, right now I'd say at most of our units, 50 to 60% and upwards of our business is online. It's also through third-party marketplaces, and it's being delivered. So in terms of new store build-outs and expansion, or what development looks like in the future, whether it's us or other operating partners or potential franchisees or other licensed locations, it's we're having to redevelop what our format looks like. So we don't need to operate in 1,500 square feet or 1,300 square feet with an expansive dining room. I mean, we really only need the 300 to 400 square feet, and maybe potentially a self-ordering kiosk, and you could still absorb upwards of the million in AUV, depending on location. So non-traditional locations are definitely very lucrative right now, and also with our experience with this licensing play as well, we're definitely looking at, again, universities, airports, college campuses, and yeah, these types of plays are opportunities.
You know, I do a lot of work with the grocery store sushi people, and what they'll have too is they'll have like a one grocery store unit, and then they'll have like 3 other grocery stores that don't have the actual kitchen space, but they'll put a cooler in and then just stock those coolers, right? So even that grab and go from the non-trad is huge, because, you know, you can get somebody in there at 5 a.m. in the morning and they can bang out 50 bowls, and then they just take them in refrigerator bags to the place, put them in the case. And, you know, it's such a win-win. But you said something that I wanted to clue in on too. You know, my biggest thing has always been with these restaurants, and because I saw it when I was working in franchise assistance at Quiznos, and I was basically analyzing people's P&Ls all the time, is just be as small as you humanly can, right? Like, rent is such a killer. And, you know, you get these guys and they got a 1,500 foot, 2,000 foot restaurant. Well, that's what's going to cause them to go out of business, right? Because they just can't afford that rent over time if they don't have the sales. And, you know, also it just looks bad. Yeah, it's funny. One of my mentors, he was my boss at Quiznos, and now he works, I think, for Wow, one of those multi-brand franchise concepts. But you know, he said there, because he worked at Boston Market, he said the original Boston Market was like a window, like on a city street in Boston, and people would walk up and they would order a rotisserie chicken,
Wow.
and, you know, mashed potatoes and gravy and stuffing, and then they would get it through a window and they would walk away. And then you think about how big every Boston Market was. Boston Market was like the size, I mean, it was like a full-size restaurant, you know? And, you know, when grocery stores introduce rotisserie chicken, what do they have? They've got like a 4-foot warming rack in their, you know, their building, and that's all they need, you know? So yeah, I love the idea of scaling it back and being more delivery focused, you know? Okay. So we talked about your company. So we're going to move on. So really, that was question 1. But we'll go fast to the other ones. Question 2, what were the big challenges that your dad and his partner really faced when they got started? Like, I'm sure it wasn't just all roses, right? They were coming from working at restaurants, trying to build their own restaurants. What were the big challenges that kind of hammered them, and how did they get by them?
I think the first thing that sticks to mind, and it might not be the first thing that comes up in conversations for most people, but it's something that definitely resonated with me, is just brand recognition. So when you look at something, and we also experienced it with our Poke concept as well, is just educating the consumer. I think growing up in grade school, when I mentioned Subway to some of my peers or colleagues, or just even in passing with strangers on the street or at different social functions, it was like, oh, Subway, like the train station. So obviously we were able to penetrate that and kind of establish that brand recognition and solidify what Subway is. But yeah, it might sound something like might be very mundane or um, not as, or how do I say it? A lot of people wish that was the problem. Hey, people
Yeah.
can't pronounce the brand name or they're not aware of it. But when I think about it, when you look at supply chain or labor or rents or these other liabilities or overhead costs, they weren't as challenging as they are in the current market or at this point in time. So it was actually, to your point and to your question, something I was actually reflecting on recently, and as we're exploring other concepts, and not to get too ahead of myself, but again, we experienced the same thing with Poke. A lot of people are like, oh, like Pokemon or Pokeme or
Yeah.
so just again educating the consumer that yeah, it's pronounced Poke. And I think also the acai category went through or is currently going through the same thing. I think the category is well established. I think there's still a lot of room for growth, but some people are completely blindsided when you mention the word acai. It's like super novel and definitely the first time I've ever heard about it. So yes, that's something unique that I thought I'd share. But
Well, no,
I would
and
say,
we're bootstrapped too. And so trying to penetrate into a marketplace and trying to like educate people without like backer money. Like if you have private equity or a VC fund and they gave you 30 million bucks, you could spend $5 million and, educate the entire world, like you could really make a difference. But when you're trying to do it on a budget, it's really hard to penetrate in. Did you guys solve that problem with Subway and with this new concept with really targeted like a zip code local store marketing or internet marketing, but really dialing it into just around the stores?
so both concepts took different approaches. I think for Subway, it was simply predicated on rapid growth
Mm-hmm.
and opening up where your competitor was. So if there was a McDonald's, we're going to open up a Subway.
Sure.
And that's how we were getting the brand out. For the Poke thing, if we could almost flip that perspective on its head, for us, even though you see a million mom and pops springing up who are attempting to serve Poke or be successful in this category, we actually saw that as a benefit. So, especially for something like Poke, which it's not like you're introducing a new sandwich concept into the market or a new yogurt concept. Poke was truly novel, especially here in Southern California in 2015, 2016. So, for us, instead of spending ad dollars and over leveraging ourselves, we allowed our competition, even if they were successful or not, to do the advertising for us. So instead of having boots on the ground or developing our footprint further and overextending ourselves, we allowed our competitors to do it, and we were really banking on our operating experience. And that's why we're still here today, whereas a lot of our competitors are not. Because especially when you look at the CapEx of a Poke concept, it's a very lean concept. You don't have an oven hood, a fryer, a bread baking oven, all these things. You just need a two-door fridge or a two-door freezer in the back and a table to prep your fish and produce and a service line in the front with a POS. Again, I'm speaking very loosely, but I think you're picking up on what I'm putting down. So, yes, the two unique approaches, two completely different. And in general, the categories are different too. I think that also reinforces some of our decision making. Poke is a little bit more of an elevated concept because of the culture attached to raw fish. So going back to the beginning of our conversation, you're alluding to the different touch points between our four walls. Our, again, big focus is again on the Poke side of things, our operating experience and controlling again, clean shops, clean restaurants, good service, convenience. And more recently, the big trend is deliverability and being able to execute in that realm. And we're doing a really good job.
And also too, let's just be honest, like your dad started in 1989 and you started this in 2015, 2016, totally different worlds, right?
Yeah.
Completely different worlds, miles apart. Your dad would have been putting flyers on cars and sending out maybe a postcard, right? And you guys were able to go on Facebook and go, I want to see, if you did anything, you want to be like, I want to only talk to these 250 people, So.
Well said. Yeah, I think also just, again, we're digitally native in this generation, a lot more collaborations with brands that are synergistic. We just recently did something with Zab's hot sauce. So we're able to collaborate and introduce a hot honey with some of our sauces, like a spicy mayo, and bring those together and marry the two. And it's an amazing flavor combination. And our guests really love it. Whereas maybe in my dad's generation, they were going to the Lakers, the Clippers games at the sports arena across the street and literally walking the aisles, handing out coupons to fans while they were watching the basketball games. So
I'll try that today.
Yeah, just
go to the Lakers game and hand out coupons. See what happens.
Yep.
What's it called? Okay, next question. What is your big challenge that you're dealing with right now?
Everything. I think just the biggest one is labor. So half of our company has been affected by this new $20 minimum wage increase for concepts with more than 60 locations nationally. So on the Subway side of things,
you didn't get exempted because of the baking of the bread?
No, I think that was
that's Panera, right?
Misnomer. I don't know if that's the right word, but yeah, that was a little. I know there was a lot of PR regarding that, but that was debunked really quickly, and definitely a lot of legal and support from corporate Subway and local development agents also debunked that really quick. Unfortunately, there wasn't an exemption, and I believe the Panera exec or franchisee also came out and said that he'll be paying $20 as well. But labor is the biggest challenge. So even dating back 6 months ago when we knew this was coming, essentially running leaner and getting our team members used to being more efficient, increasing productivity, while simultaneously getting our traffic and our customers and our guests used to a leaner operation as well. Meaning, whereas 5, 10, 15 years ago, if you walked into a Subway, you were used to seeing 4 or 5 people on the line, whereas now you'll probably just see 2 and you'll have to wait and get used to it, unfortunately, while also paying a higher price. So these are things we can't control. The things that we can are, again, clean shops, to your point, guest service, hospitality, and these things that we can control. So rents, and working with landlords is incredibly difficult as well. Rents are going up, and at least on the Subway side of things, landlords aren't even looking at Subway franchisees. So when renewals are coming up, again, they want to get the Subways out and bring in the new hot concepts, whether it's the Chipotle's, Panda Express, the pizza concept, and double or triple rent. Liabilities, obviously California is also a very litigious state. If I could be a little dramatic, it's like if you look at someone the wrong way, it's $1 million lawsuit. We also have this phenomenon with drive-by lawsuits. A lot of people won't even visit your restaurant. They'll just be on kind of like Google Maps or Google Earth and see that the specs of the parking lot or maybe like accessibility ramps aren't up to code and things like that. We recently also got, just like many operators and many concepts, I think our website wasn't up to code or the specs weren't right regarding accessibility as well. So, yeah, I mean, we're just being bombarded from every which way. I saw something on LinkedIn, some conversations, someone, which I wasn't really engaging or wasn't really into the commentary. He was arguing that a lot of concepts that are increasing prices this day and age are failing concepts. Whereas when you look at the In-N-Outs of the world, or others, their prices are a little bit more stable, even though they're doing increases, but they're not as aggressive. And yeah, wholly disagree. I mean, I think just so just everything. We're managing all the chaos, many price increases, rents, labor challenges. Conversely, I would say actually on the labor topic, with the downturn in the market, and then we're also seeing a lot of changes in white collar employment as well. Especially, I think it was 350 or 400,000 plus layoffs in tech in the last year and a half or so, and that does have a trickle down effect in terms of the labor pool with our business model. So right now, it's like when you put an ad. We're seeing the most applications that we've ever seen in our lifetime, even at locations where that could be really suburban heavy, and traditionally we only got like high school students or people who are commuting 30 minutes just to get into town. But now it's like I posted an ad at one of these locations, for example, and within a day or two, it's like close to 100 applications, a lot of them extremely qualified. Things like that. So, yeah, interesting times. So, you win some and you lose some.
It's funny. I have a buddy, very successful business guy, and he said, you're not a business owner until you have to settle a fraudulent lawsuit. Because the people just sue you for that. Just go, well, we'll settle for 20 grand or we'll go to court. And then your lawyer and his lawyer's like, well, we can take him to court. It's going to cost $200K, or you could just pay him the 20K and just suck it up. I know you're pissed. It's horrible, but you should just pay him the 20K, and then he'll sign a contract that he'll never sue you again. And that guy's making a living like that. And it's ridiculous. These people are vultures, and hopefully they'll pick the wrong person someday who's got a lawyer in the family and $100 million and nothing but time, and they'll destroy them. But for the rest of us, we have to look at those things seriously. Okay. Well, that was a great question. That actually was like a wonderful answer, because I think it just shows you the challenges that we're facing, right? Like we have these artificial challenges that are being thrust upon us by government. And then they don't even, they're like, it's just one thing. Well, no, it's not one thing. There's 50 people out there trying to get in my pocket every single day, Okay. It's time for our war story question. Just tell me, if you got a story that was just one of those, oh my gosh, I can't believe we got through it moments, let her rip. It could be funny. It could be sad. It could be happy, whatever you got.
Yeah, I think just a big theme in a lot of conversations, at least at this point in time for many of us, is COVID. Without fixating too much on that topic or getting into fringe theories or how everyone's reaction was, I think it was a big learning for a lot of operators. And I think the biggest learning that we took away from it was just one key decision that we made in day one or day two. I think it was like the second week of March where an emergency was declared. And even though we were seeing a lot of grocery stores kind of being ransacked in the week or two before that, but I think it was the second week of March where an emergency was declared. I think stay-at-home order maybe shortly after that. But one of the most important decisions we made was deciding to stay open. So even if some of our units were doing $50, $100, $200 a day, obviously we adjusted hours and scheduling and labor accordingly. But that was one of the key decisions we made at that point. So, and I think that's what allowed us to survive and kind of leapfrog some of our competitors and stay top of mind. So I think when you look at the American psyche, when you look at consumers' attention span, and how competitive this market is, again, all while trying to stay safe, all while being in tune with our emotions, because obviously as operators with our vast experience, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be fearful. We're human as well. And we were walking in lockstep with our colleagues and team members who, some of them, like I said, are even in high school. So even for someone like myself, I've been in this business for about 20 years now. just asking some of our colleagues who, again, we're still in high school, what should we do today? Should we stay open? And kind of garnering feedback and sentiment in lifetime was invaluable and definitely very impactful for me. So yeah, with what we kind of saw was a lot of concepts that decided to close, and it's to no fault of their own, whether it was just for a short period of time, whether it was a month, 2 months, or just maybe 2 or 3 weeks. In retrospect, obviously things become a lot more clear, but I think with the way the consumer, at least in this country, but more specifically this market that I'm in, operates, if you're just driving by or if you're on Google and you see a store is closed, there's definitely a lot more inclination when you're making your next decision on your next visit a month from now or 2 months from now. If you're going to visit that shop and you remember in your mind's eye that, hey, it was closed, or the consumer isn't going to want to spend an extra 2 or 3 seconds wanting to do the work. Hey, let me open up, let me surf the web, let me check to see if they're open today. When if you established from day one, even through turmoil and tragedy and a global pandemic, that, hey, you're going to be open and you're reliable, your shop is clean, the service was convenient, you're in and out within a few minutes, that leader, that manager that was always there was still there during these times, I think that creates trust. And as we know in our business, when you create trust, it's very conducive to sales. So, and the more seamless that is, that's what leverage looks like as well. So, and that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier regarding record sales during COVID. And yeah, so I don't know if that directly answers your question regarding tragedy or war story, but yeah, I mean, there was a lot of depressing days. I think there was a lot of rain too. I was in some of my shops on some days, just looking out through the front window, and it's raining, not one car in a parking lot, where there's like 1,000, or excuse me, hundreds or even close to 1,000 parking spaces and not even one car in there. Getting texts from your parents like, hey, don't go into work today, it's not worth it. Just things like that. But yeah, just a lot of growth and learnings from that point in time. And I think we all came out a little bit stronger, if anything.
Absolutely. And you know, there was no blueprint for that. Like everybody had to figure it out for themselves. But I can tell you from my own personal experience, you know, it really there it really separated the true restaurateurs from the people, from the posers, if you will, I guess would be a way to put it. Like, because, you know, the concepts that said, okay, this is the new paradigm and we're fighting. We're not going down. We're not just going to lay down and take it. We're going to figure this out. And, you know, we have a Mexican place. It's a full service Mexican place here. And the first day he was on Facebook, you know, hey, we're still open. Every waiter was out in the parking lot. They redid the parking lot. They bought a ton of to-go containers, and they just figured out how could they do their menu outside, right? Like, it's just, but he fought, right? He fought. He wasn't going to go down without a fight, and it was great. And it sounds like you guys did the exact same thing. And you know, I mean, that decision probably was very painful and hard to make, and you made it, and you were brave, and so you were rewarded for that bravery. So that's wonderful. Is there anything you want to plug? Do you want to send out the name of your poke chain, or push your Subway locations and tell people, you know, hey, go check these guys out?
Yeah, so thanks again for your time. In regards to our Subway and our team on that side, we're located all across LA. So whether it's across the street from USC, we're here in the beach cities here in Rancho Palos Verdes. We're across the street from SoFi Stadium here in South Los Angeles. And on our Poke side of things, we're Pokeme, our flagship locations in Westwood, near Westwood Village, right across the street from UCLA. We're across the street from USC and UC Irvine as well. And
Nice.
we're in California's biggest food hall in the Westfield Topanga Mall in the West Valley as well. And yeah.
Well, great, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Thank to all the listeners. Empire Builders will be back soon with a new episode.